Why, hello. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you guys are dialing in from. My name's Tyler. I'm here at Julius headquarters today. I'm going to be going over our onboarding webinar. This is one we do every week just to go through the basics of, first, what is Julius? Second, how do you actually get the most out of Julius, from how to prompt Julius, how to upload files, and how to actually run an analysis using our conversation and chats feature. We're going to do a quick audio check to see if everything looks good on our end. I'm going to update or adjust this guy here. A little bit more light coming in. It's a little darker. There we go. And then update this guy here. Cool. All right. How's everyone doing today? Where's everyone tuning in from? Let's see. Everything sounds good. Let's see, quick audio check. I think we're doing all right. Sometimes we have the audio is a little bit too low. I've heard sometimes there's echo, but I'm not seeing any complaints in the chat so far, so I think we should be good. All right, let me go ahead and switch over my screen here. This is our Julius landing page. This is where you could first get started using Julius, whether this is your first time hearing about Julius, or maybe you're a returning user or someone who signed up recently. You can just go to julius.ai and it'll bring you to this page here. Several ways that you can go ahead and get started first. You could sign up with any Google, Apple, or any other email address. Definitely recommend using your work email. It's really, really helpful, especially when you want to get access to some work files. In this case, I'm going to click Login, and we're going to continue with Google. This is the account that I have to walk through today. This brings us to our chat interface. This is the easiest way that you can get started with Julius. What is Julius? Well, Julius is your AI data analyst. You could think of it just like any analyst or data analyst that you've interacted with. Julius can run any sorts of types of analysis, from exploratory data analysis to even financial or marketing analysis. It can connect to any sort of data, whether it's files that we upload, which is what we'll walk through today, or if you have your data living in a warehouse like Postgres or Snowflake or BigQuery. Or if you have your data living in another application, maybe you have your data in Google Ads or Meta Ads or in Stripe, for example. We have all these different ways for Julius to access those files and then analyze them for you. It doesn't just stop there. Julius can also visualize any analysis as well. So any tables or any charts or any visualizations that help with your analysis or help tell the story of your analysis, Julius can do as well. We have a whole bunch of different features that we'll walk through today. And all of the stuff that we've built is meant to help support that mission, get everyone access to data and data insights a lot easier than needing to go to either a team or trying to learn how to query these things or write the code yourself. So here we are. This is the chat interface. The easiest way to get started is by clicking on this plus button here. And this will bring us to the file upload or the file selector menu. In this case, I'm going to just select the upload file button. And I'm going to choose one of these files here. Let's start with this product catalog file. Julius can handle a whole bunch of different types of files. In fact, there's not many files it can't handle, from CSVs, Excel files, TXT files, even PDFs, things like PNGs. You can name it all. Julius can analyze those and access those. So here we uploaded the file, and we see Julius has loaded a sample of the data into this table, just as a quick preview of what we could analyze, at least within this data set. Let's ask a really basic question. I'm going to say, give me an overview of this data. I'm going to press enter. And this is going to run what we call our first message with Julius. This is going to kick off a few things. First, Julius is going to look at our message that we sent. So give me an overview of this data. It's going to think through the code that it needs to write to fulfill that prompt or that message. So Julius will write all of this code. This is Python code here. And it's going to run it which means just run the code inside of our environment and print us out the results. And that's the essential life cycle of working with Julius. You goes from adding in or selecting your data, choosing what you want to do, whether it's a specific type of analysis or what type of work you want Julius to do. Julius will write the code. Here we see it writing the code here. And then it's going to run this code for us. And then we could follow up with any questions, follow-ups, or adjustments to either the analysis or the visualizations as we see fit. Okay. So here we see Julius gave us an overview of that one CSV that I uploaded. It gave us a table showing the different product IDs and the cost per ID. It gave us the different products and also the product names. And then it also looked at the distribution of these products too, and you could see it starting to visualize some of this as well, all with that simple prompt of, hey, just show me an overview of the data. Let's add in some more files here. I'm going to click on the plus button. I'm going to upload, and here we're going to select these other 3 files, and you could do multiple files at the same time. I'm going to select these 3, and I'm going to press open to add them all to Julius. We'll add it on. I'll tell Julius, hey, let's analyze these files as well. And this is our second message with Julius. When you guys first create an account, if you haven't already, you'll get 15 free messages a month. This resets at the beginning of the month. As a thank you for joining this webinar, I'll follow up afterwards in an email with a code that you guys can use to get 7 days of Pro for free. So that way you could try out all the different features without being hit by the limit of messages there. We'll talk through some of the differences between our free plan and our Pro plan, but to get started, free is generally enough to get started and just seeing what Julius is like, and we'll talk through what that looks like here. All right, so Julius is writing the code again. The cool thing here is that you can see what Julius is doing. If you're, like myself, not familiar with writing code, you could click on this and Julius will actually explain what the code is doing here. So here it says, this code will print the dimensions of the inventory, and then it'll show us the shape of the inventory and also the counts of unique values in one of those columns. If you ever run into any bugs, right? Sometimes Julius might write some code that doesn't really quite work out on the first try. No worries. Julius is going to update the code itself, and we'll try to debug and fix it until it gets you the results to fulfill your message. All right, so we have Julius working through it here, running the code, and then it looks like it's just about to print those codes here, the outputs here. All right, so we have all those 3 new data sets added. You can see Julius printing out what they look like. And then here we see some visualizations giving us another overview of how these all relate to one another. So we see customer age distribution, customer gender distribution, customers by region, for example, and even things like inventory movements and order quantity. So far, these questions have been really high level, and that's sort of the beauty of Julius is it can do both high level exploratory analysis, whether it's data that you haven't worked on before, or maybe you just want Julius to take a look at the data set that you're working with. Julius can do a really high level overview. Alternatively, you could ask very, very specific questions too. So maybe we'll dive even deeper into this data. I'll say, show me which products are most popular, let's say for female customers. And we'll type that in. So this is, again, writing Python. I said our environment earlier. What does that mean? Every single account, whether it's free or paid, comes with dedicated RAM and dedicated processing power, just like any other computer. It's sort of like your virtual computer. To view this, you can click in the upper left-hand corner, and you can see how much RAM Julius is using and how much space you have, and then also how much CPU Julius is using and how much space you have. The free accounts really have enough memory to get by 99% of use cases, I would say. I think it's very rare you'll actually need more than any 1 or 2 gigabytes of RAM, depending on how much data you're working with. But if you do want to expand, and again, with the pro code that I'll give you guys, you can click on expand here and you can see the different types of containers that we have from 8 gigabytes of RAM to maybe ones that have files that last even longer, to ones that have even more RAM. If you're dealing with multiple thousands or even millions of rows of data, you could select this here too. All right, this is interesting. So let's go up and we'll look at the most popular products for female customers. Here we see the product names, quantity, and transactions. Julius has done the analysis for us and says, hey, the top 5 products we have are noise-canceling earbuds, fitness tracker, reusable water bottles, etc. And even some more key insights too. So the popularity is remarkably consistent across all products. The difference between the most and least popular product is about 45 units. Reason for that is this data is synthetic, so that's probably why. And then we see some revenue leaders too. Some noise-canceling earbuds generate the highest revenue, while wireless mouses or mice rank third. And then finally, we see some visualizations. I don't know why Julius chose to do pink here. That's pretty funny. Maybe it's because I asked for female customers, but here you can see it visualize products by quantity, transaction count, etc. All of this has been done using Claude 4.5 Sonnet. This is another question that we get generally. You could choose which model you want to use to power your analysis and power Julius by choosing this selector down here. And you could see the default model, which is a mix of either Anthropic's Claude or OpenAI's GPT models. Or you could select the specific model. So we have Claude 4.5 Sonnet here, or you could select GPT-5 or GPT-5 Thinking. And you could show more if you want O3 as well, some of the older models too. We're always adding in the latest and greatest models at Julius, so you could always stay tuned if there's a specific model that you like using more. Another common question we get from folks is, hey, which model should I use? You know, I just want to analyze my data or I want to visualize my data. And it really does depend on what you're trying to do. We've had success with both Claude and with OpenAI's GPT models, but it really does depend on what you're trying to do and how you like the outputs, right? So I would say definitely just try them out. We also have some videos in our YouTube down below where we walk through, hey, we ran the same prompt with the same models, and this is how, the speed varies, or maybe how the visualizations look slightly different. Changing the model might change the way that they approach solving our messages that we're sending to Julius. Another cool feature we have are our suggested prompts. Sometimes you dive into some data and you're not really sure where you want to go or what question to ask next. The cool thing is that Julius has already taken a look, done some relationships between the data, understands how they relate to one another, and came up with some suggested prompts down here. So, for example, what product categories drive female purchases, which age group buys the most electronics, and if you want, you could also regenerate these by clicking on this button here as well. Clicking one of these will say when do female purchases peak throughout the year, and you click this, it's just like sending another message. Julius will, again, write the code, execute it, and then print out any results. Let's talk about some other parts of the UI. If you open up this side panel on the right side, 3 different tabs here that we'll walk through. The first and most common one that we use and that I use is the Data Explorer. Really handy way just to see the different ways that Julius is either manipulating the data, has filtered the data, or is even using the data to power those visualizations that we saw earlier. The cool thing is you could just click on any one of these and you'll see essentially the data frame. It's a fancy word, again, for just table that is powering the analysis that either Julius is creating or that Julius has pulled from the files that we've uploaded. The other way to access this, if you scroll up, is for any one of these tables that you see here, you can click on Expand and Julius will open up the respective table in the Data Explorer. This is useful just to see, again, how Julius is using the data and how it's manipulating the data. Oftentimes we get questions like, hey, how do I check what Julius is doing? Or how do I know that the results are accurate? It's no different from asking any other data analyst, whether human or AI. If you want to fact check their work, one of the best ways is to look at the source material or the tables that the analyst is working with. And you could see if there's anything that looks off, or if you see that something just doesn't look quite right, or if you see it's filtering or even using the wrong table to begin with. More often than not, whenever I have issues with Julius creating a visualization the way I want it to, chances are it's because it's using the wrong table, and you just have to clarify, hey, actually products by quantity for female customers, let's actually do the female product quantity table, not the female popularity table, for example. I've had several times where Julius gets mixed up, especially after a very long conversation where there's lots of different tables that it could choose from. All right, I'll scroll down, and then here we can see how Julius followed up with that suggested prompt before. A couple other really cool features that we have over here is the reasoning tab, which I'll click on this side. If you click on the reasoning button down here in the chat menu, this will allow Julius to think through a very complex prompt. So if you have a really tough thing, so maybe I'll say, for example, what's the most complex thing I could ask? Let's create a machine learning model to forecast which products are best to focus on to improve revenue for our mail users and customers, for example. And I'll press enter here. Fairly complex prompt. When you have something that would likely need multiple steps, best thing to do is turn on reasoning. Julius will come up with a plan. So here we see a 6-step plan to walk through to fulfill that prompt, right? When you're first getting started, I would say generally try your best to separate out the prompts, just that way it's easier to follow along what Julius is doing. But in those cases where you want to just do a very complex prompt all in one go, you could do it using reasoning here. Here we see Julius ran into an error. And here you can see on the right side, the red X. The cool thing about advanced reasoning is Julius is going to update its plan as it runs into these errors. It's going to fix the bugs that it ran into or try to think of a different approach to fulfill what we're looking for. So again, I find using reasoning is really handy, especially when you want to do something pretty complex. Training machine learning models is pretty complex. It's a multi-step process. Generally, you have to split up the data and test and evaluate on the data. So doing it in one prompt is pretty ambitious, but we'll see how it does with the reasoning here. The other common feature that we have next to this is the memory. This is for extending Julius's memory. Really handy if you're working across multiple days or multiple weeks on the same project. If you're working across multiple different threads as well. When you give Julius context about either the project that you're working on or about your company or your university, or you giving it like specific types of instructions that you want and context that you want it to keep throughout all of its conversations, generally turning on extended memory is helpful there. What this does is it gives Julius even more context and it extends the window of how much it knows about what you're working on versus just using a chat, which has a little bit shorter of a window. Better for one-off analysis versus working across multiple days or even multiple weeks. Cool, so we'll see how this generates here. All right, looks like we're almost printing here. And then the one last thing I'll talk about, we'll see how this goes, is the tools. This is another place for you to update some of the way that Julius will actually visualize your visualizations. It's going to visualize your data differently. We have several pre-built what we call chart themes here. All of these will update either the way the axes are labeled or even shown, the coloring or the way that Julius handles the shape of the charts, for example. So we have a scientific theme, a business theme, for example. We even have one in beta still that's our interactive charts. So if you want something similar to dashboards that you might see where you hover over a data point and you see the labeling of the series, really handy there. And even a dark theme if you're a night owl like most of the team here is at Julius. The other really cool thing that you can do is click on theme settings here. And if you click on new theme, you could actually create a theme from scratch. You could update the primary, background, and secondary colors to whatever use case that you need, whether it's to match your company's branding or color guidelines, or if you need it for your university and you have work that you've done already before and you want to stick to the same sort of color palettes and color themes, you could update those here. The other cool thing here is you could also update really specific parts of the chart, like the bar charts and the way things are labeled, even down to the specific colors of the edges or even the sizes of the widths. And you can just keep adding in more suggestions here for all the different ways you can customize your visualizations. Once you save it, you could use it and it'll stay here, and you could use this across all of your different conversations as well. Finally, while we're in this menu, this has a lot of the same different settings that we talked about earlier. Here in the general menu, you have the different ways to select the models. a way to update light mode or dark mode. And even if you want to turn off or hide the code that Julius is running, maybe you don't really care how it writes the Python code, or maybe you don't really want to see the code, you can hide it there. And that way Julius will only show the outputs in response to your prompts. And then finally, the last most relevant feature I'll talk about here is the Customize Julius menu. And here, this is for custom instructions. These are specific instructions that you want to give to Julius throughout all of your conversations. If you have specific formulas that you use to calculate things like maybe NRR, right? If you're a business user, or if you have specific formulas you're using in your research, you could add that all into here. Or if there's things like your use case, maybe you want it to talk to you in a specific way, like if you want it in Spanish, for example, or if you want Julius to use an academic tone versus a scientific tone versus a business tone. You could add all of this into the custom instructions, and Julius will carry this with it wherever it goes in every single conversation that you use. Very handy when you have specific nits or specific ways that you want Julius to interact with you or handle your data. All right, so it looks like Julius is still working through. Again, this is the sort of the double-edged sword of using the advanced reasoning and trying to one-shot some of these prompts. Sometimes having a really complex prompt will just take a little bit more time than trying to break it up into bite-sized steps over time. And then finally, while we're on the bottom bar here, the only two buttons I haven't talked about yet are connectors. These are different ways that you could access your data. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the webinar. If you are a business user, or maybe you're a hobbyist and you're making your own application, maybe you have your data living in a database somewhere that gets updated automatically. Maybe it's your Postgres or your Snowflake, BigQuery, or somewhere else. Typically, the workflow would have been that you would have had to written a query to grab that data, download it as a CSV or an Excel file, and then re-upload it back to Julius to analyze. With our data connectors, this streamlines the whole thing. We'll just plug Julius right to the source, helps with getting the data seamlessly right into Julius, and it also helps with getting live data and live insights without needing to upload any CSVs or any files as well. Every other week, we have a more in-depth webinar on data connectors. If you are interested in learning more, maybe it does resonate with you that, hey, I do have my data in Postgres, or maybe I do have a Meta Ads or Google Ads account. Tune into subscribe to our Illuma, and you'll see when the next data connectors webinar is. Likewise, you can look at our YouTube. If you look at the live section, we have all of our previous webinars on data connectors too. So we'll walk through how to set them up, what each one is meant for, and how you can interact with those data connectors to get the most out of Julius too. All right, let's look at some of these results really quickly. Again, this was a pretty complex prompt, and you can see again, Julius had created a plan and broke it up into different steps in order to forecast our sales for male demographic. And you can see here the different products, which ones we should focus on, how it trained the model. Here it used a random forest model and also a gradient boosting model. Scoring to see if it was even relevant or not, or if even corollary here or not. And then the scores here and the feature importance, like what matters most when you're training a model. I'd imagine it's not going to be too accurate. Again, this data is pretty synthetic. I would say using live data or using real data is probably better for this use case. But here we can see how Julius would have approached it had this been real data. Cool. And the last thing I'll talk about really briefly is agent. These are Julius custom agents, something that we haven't really talked about. This is a brand new feature that's in Julius. I don't think we've even announced it yet, but just while we're on the topic of the bottom bar, if you click on create an agent, it'll pop up this menu here. And if you click on create agent, it'll bring up this menu here. What is an agent? Well, it's very similar to custom instructions, right? In custom instructions, the ones I was showing in that menu earlier, that applies to all of your chats, and it's pretty broad and pretty general, right? If I'm telling Julius to answer me in Spanish, the custom instructions are probably the best place for that. But what if you have a specific use case, right? Maybe isn't just one type of data analyst out there, right? And there also isn't just one type of someone who makes visualizations. Maybe you have someone that works on product analytics, or maybe you have someone that works on marketing analytics, or maybe you have someone who's not even an analyst at all, but knows more about your business. That's where agents come in. It's sort of like a profile, if you will, of Julius that it'll use when you're interacting with Julius. Sort of like a filter, sort of like a lens. So here you can name your agent. So in this case, I'll say, hey, this will be my expert data visualizer for business slide decks, right? Maybe I know that I have some coworkers and some old friends who are really good at making visualizations that are good to show in meetings. I'm not good at it, but I know that there are some folks out there like that. So I'll say this agent is really, really good at making slide visualizations for slide decks. Here you could toggle the different types of behavior, whether you want short, standard, or detailed responses. This means sometimes Julius can just give you a really quick summary and then focus on what you wanted to focus on versus a really lengthy response. In this case, I would probably say short response is better. I don't really care for the insights. I more care for really good visualizations for business use cases. You could change the way that Julius will visualize or at least show the outputs. So whether you want the visualizations first, or maybe you want the files and data frames first, or you want the insights first. Here I'm going to say visualizations first. And then you could even customize this instructions for this specific agent. So I'll say, hey, I want you to, or say, imagine you have an MBA and have worked, say, for decades as a consultant. You are an expert at taking data and insights and visualizing this in a compelling way for a business audience in a meeting. The visualizations should be concise. They should have clear labels. This is how I'm imagining I would like slide decks in my business meetings. I should have clear labels this is for audiences who might not be as in the weeds. They should not have too many series. You don't want something that looks like spaghetti. I want something that has, the top 5 metrics, for example. Focus on the top 5 metrics. And should have a short bullet point summary that can be added to the slide deck to provide context. This is an instruction that I would give if I was imagining, hey, I'm going to tell you to work on some slide decks for me. Definitely don't do anything like super in the weeds, right? And then here on the training tasks and approaches, you could actually tell Julius, hey, if you were to receive a message or a prompt similar to this is how I want you to handle it, right? So if I say, visualize this data for my executive leadership team, don't dive too deep in the weeds in the analysis. Focus on the high level / heavy hitting points in your visualizations versus going too in depth where you might lose the audience. Not everyone has context on what we're visualizing and working on. We'll say another one. We'll say, hey, where are the biggest areas for improvement for my marketing campaigns? I'm going to emphasize again, do not go too deep in the weeds. Whenever you list an acronym or an abbreviation, spell it out in a short bullet point. Give any other business context that others might not have. When visualizing these, again, keep it high level. I think that's the worst thing, right? I don't know if you guys feel the same, but whenever I go to a meeting and then someone doesn't really understand the audience, it's not people that are in the day-to-day with them, and they just create a visualization that's really, really in-depth, and it just leads to more questions that aren't as productive, That's what I don't like, and that's what I'm trying to explain here in these tasks. And then we'll say a knowledge base. Here's where you could describe, what you're working on. Maybe every month we have a sync on our marketing performance with my executive team. This is the only time they sync with us. so they don't have all the context. I much rather like to show with versus tell, and whenever I need to tell, I like to do so with bullet points that are concise and that won't pull us too deep in the weeds. And then finally, you could add in any additional capabilities, whether you want Julius to search the web or not. In this case, I'm just going to not toggle this on. And in the upper part, I'm going to click Save. The cool thing about these custom agents is you could share them with your team, right? Again, we haven't really touched on teams too much, but if you have other folks in your university or organization that are using Julius, you could share it with them and they could all access the same agent. So it's really useful for keeping that same context in all your conversations. And then finally, I'm going to click Test Agent here, and we could take this over to the chat. And here you can click on where the no agent was before, and here I'm going to click on our expert data visualizer. I'm going to add in those files again, and I want to see how it looks a little bit different. We'll see if it's able to do this. So I'll tell Julius, take a look at these files, do some analysis, and create a stunning visualization that I can add to my weekly or monthly marketing sync for my leadership team. I don't have to add too much context here, but I'm just specifying just a little bit. Leadership team. And I'll press enter. And we'll see how Julius handles this. Cool. While this is going, I'm going to open up the sidebar here just to talk through some of these other parts of the UI that we haven't spoken about. I mentioned teams earlier. This is where I'll open up, let's see, here on the left side panel. I'll open up my team settings. I think I could do this here. Teams is just like any other Teams feature on any other application that you might use. It's an easy way to get more folks that are working either on the work that you're doing, or maybe they're working in your same or even a different department, all in the same place. The biggest help is that it helps with like billing. It's easier to just get invoices all set up in one place. But also it helps with collaborating and sending files and sharing files with other users who are either on your team or in a different department. And the really cool thing is you could share these chats pretty easily here. You can create specific team threads, and you can even do notebooks, which is something we talk about in our other webinars, but an easy way for you to collaborate on the same thread, for example. So if I go to my notebooks here, and I could share this with someone on my team, and we could even collaborate on this in real time, which means, hey, just like a Google Doc, I want us all to hop on this analysis and let's work on this together, work on the prompts together, what we're going to ask Julius, and see the results in real time. So that's also one of the helpful parts of using Teams. But the biggest thing is just sharing in chats and sharing the analysis that you're doing. It's really handy. Teams are also beneficial if you are using our data connectors that I mentioned before. So over here, we have all of the different ones that I mentioned. You could connect one of these on the team level, and you could share it with everybody to have access to. The best case I've seen for certain enterprises is, hey, members of the data team love Julius. They want to unblock or enable business users or non-technical users to ask questions. So they'll set up the connection once, they'll make it available for the rest of their team, and now people on the marketing department or the sales team or on the operations team can all ask questions to that same data source without needing to set it up on their own. So that's the other benefit of Teams. I'm going to go back to my chat here and we'll see how Julius is going. All right, so this is how it came up with it. And you can see the outputs look different from our analysis before. Instead of giving me any bullet points or any tables, here it gave me this really cool visualization that I actually would like to post inside of a slide deck. Here it has a high-level overview of revenue by product category. The labeling is very clear. Again, it doesn't go too in-depth on any one metric in particular. I think it would have been bad if we dove into like our demographic information really quick, right? I think here this is actually pretty high level enough. And then some really good bullet points here for the sales leader. So electronics dominates. All 4 regions show balanced performance. Fitness category shows the strongest profit margins. And then some really good concise bullet points here for strategic implications. And I think this is good. And you can see how using an agent is helpful. I've made several other agents, but if you want, you could also check out our custom agents here in the left side. And here you'll be able to see either agents that you or your team have created, or even ones that the Julius team or members of the Julius community have created as well. So here we have an agent that's really good at analyzing meta ads. And then we have another one here that's really good at creating synthetic data sets. So similar to the ones that I'm using today. So I would say just give it a try. You just click use agent and test it out in your conversations that you're having with Julius. Awesome. I know that this is a lot of information, right? I think this should be enough to get you guys started, at least using Julius. Again, I'm going to follow up after this call with a couple resources for you guys. First is a code to get Julius Pro for free for 7 days. This will unlock all of the capabilities just so you can see Julius at his best. Again, you think about like how much data analysts cost in the real world. I'm not advocating for replacing data analysts. I'm just saying the cost is at least what we've seen. Not too extraordinary, but in order for you guys to experience it, I'm going to share with you guys the code there afterwards. And then also, I'm going to share with you guys a prompting guide. Maybe you're used to using AI tools like ChatGPT or using Claude, for example. I'll share one that's specific for analyzing your data. So how can you get the most out of Julius? And again, it's sort of similar to the process we talked about earlier today, working through how you should prompt Julius, or the different ways that you could approach complex prompts that you might have and turning into bite-sized pieces. And also even ways that you could visualize your data better. Short little guide, and I'll share it with you guys there too. 3 other places that you can get resources. If you go to the question mark here at the bottom, you could visit our documentation. We're always updating our docs here for either the features that we've made or how to get the most out of Julius. So you could visit here. You could see our getting started guide. You could also see some core concepts as well as some of the different features like data connectors, notebooks, or even the Slack bot that we just announced today. If you have other questions, you can also join our community Slack channel. Really handy if you want to join here. I don't know why I haven't joined yet. I'll join with this account. I'll just show you guys inside really quickly. Really handy place just for you to, I'm just going to open it here just to show you. I'm going to use Slack in my browser. You can see different announcements from the team, from our different product announcements. If you run into any issues, you could also post bugs here, and we're pretty responsive on adding them to our radar or just flagging it or getting back to you guys if there's anything that we can solve. It's also handy because I think more people are used to sharing screenshots or videos of bugs they run into in Slack, more so than if they were to file like a ticket, right? That's at least in my point of view. Our general section where you could have, if you have any general questions or you just want to introduce yourself. We also have one called Julius Experts. This is one that I think is a little underused, but I think has the most potential right now. There's a lot of people out there that are using Julius. If you have a specific question or you want someone to help you build something out, maybe there's some contractors or consultants out there who offer their services. Really cool example we saw earlier was someone who helps roll out Julius for their clients. You could ask questions here. And then finally, props and wins. And I think that's where you could see that use case. If there's anything you just want to show off, we don't really have any strict limitations here. Someone won an award from using Julius in their data analysis. And then here's that use case I mentioned earlier about someone rolling out Julius for one of their clients. Join our community. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's feedback or whether it's just a little bit more about who you are and what you're working on. I definitely don't take it for granted, the awesome community of Julius users we have around the world. And then last but not least, if you have any other questions, you could, again, click on the bottom left bar here on the question mark icon, and you can click on help, or sorry, not help. That's the wrong place. I always get a little confused here. In the upper right-hand corner, you can click on the 3 dots, and you can click on help. Maybe we should update that. And then you could actually create a ticket here in our support. This will help resolve any questions related to billing issues or account issues, stuff you might not want to post on our community Slack. Or if you have any other things you want to reach out to us about, maybe it's a marketing advertisement or collaboration, do it through our help center here. And again, this is by clicking on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner and clicking on help to expand that menu. Last but not least, if you do need to reach out to us outside of these 2 channels, you could reach out to us at team@julius.ai. That's our email address. Or if you have a security related question, maybe you've used Julius and you're sold on it, but you need a little bit more understanding of how we handle your data. Or maybe your company has someone who needs to see our SOC 2 Type 2 report or access some of our other documents, you can point them to trust.julius.ai. This has all of our compliance that we have currently, as well as our different protocols and our different processes, including our SOC 2 Type 2 audit report, as well as any information that might be helpful, like our security one-pager, or even things like our TX ramp certification if you're in Texas. So if they do have any other follow-up questions, they could also reach out to security@julius.ai, and then we'll get back to them to answer any security-related questions that they have there. Wanted to take a second, say thank you again so much for joining us today. I really do enjoy doing these webinars. It's also good just to walk through our product. I think when we first started doing these webinars, I wasn't sure, if this was going to be useful or not. But the other cool thing is, first, seeing the community of Julius users that hop on, or they're just interested in learning how they could use Julius, but also seeing the product evolve. I think if you go back to our first recording, it's going to look a little bit different, even though that was only maybe 3 months ago. So that's the other cool part. Thanks again for joining. We do these webinars twice a week. Tune into our Luma, that's lu.ma. That's also the way that you guys RSVP today, but you can see our different events here. Maybe I'll go to, I actually get there from here. It's our Luma on Julius that you could see our upcoming webinars. And likewise, just subscribe to our YouTube. We have these twice a week. You can see our upcoming webinars as well as our other previous ones in our live section as well. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you guys have a great rest of your evening or week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And again, I'll follow up in the email too. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening or day or morning, and I'll see you guys in the next one.